Well, world, you have kept faith with me, kept faith with me. Upon the whole, you have proved to be much as you said you were. Since as a child I used to lie upon the leas and watch the sky, never, I own, expected I that life would be all fair. When Thomas Hardy wrote those words on his 86th birthday, the 20th century was already well advanced. But the childhood which Hardy was looking back to was part of the Victorian age, the age of Tennyson and Browning. As far as Hardy himself was concerned, it was a rural childhood and young manhood in an England that by the time he died in 1928 had become almost unrecognizable. As a novelist, he'd become the chronicler of Wessex, as much a country of the mind as a real place, and that was the setting, too, of many of his earlier and later poems. He'd begun as a poet, then largely abandoned poetry as he became an industrious and successful novelist. But in the furore over the publication of Jude the Obscure in 1896, he returned to it, digging out and publishing many of the poems he'd written in the 1860s, and continuing to be a prolific writer of new poems almost up to the day of his death. From these 1860 poems, there's a sharply characteristic little encounter between the country and the city, between innocence and experience, between two kinds of morality, in Hardy's dialogue between two girls, the ruined maid.
Amelia, my dear, this does everything crown. Who could have supposed I should meet you in town, and whence such fair garments, such prosperity? Oh, didn't you know I've been ruined, said she. You left us in tatters, without shoes or socks, tired of digging potatoes and spudding up docks. And now you've gay bracelets and bright feathers 3. Yes, that's how we dress when we're ruined, said she. At home in the barton you said thee and thou and thicun and thee's own and t'other. But now you're talking quite tipsy for high company. Some polish is gained with one's ruin, said she. Your hands were like paws then, your face blue and bleak. But now I'm bewitched by your delicate cheek, and your little gloves fit as on any lady. We never do work when we're ruined, said she. You used to call home life a hag-ridden dream, and you'd sigh and you'd sock, but at present you seem to know not of megrims or melancholy. True, one's pretty lively when ruined, said she. I wish I had feathers, a fine sweeping gown, and a delicate face, and could strut about town. My dear, a raw country girl such as you be cannot quite expect that. You ain't ruined, said she.
The titles of some of Hardy's books of poems suggest a lot of his habitual subject matter. Satires of circumstance, human shows, moments of vision, not moments of vision in any religious sense. Hardy was a profound skeptic, but moments of seeing things as they really are, as in this short poem, which beautifully catches a moment of chilling revelation of human vanity and its ironies. It's called In Church.
And now to God the Father, he ends, and his voice thrills up to the topmost tile. Each listener chokes as he bows and bends, and emotion pervades the crowded aisle. Then the preacher glides to the vestry door, and shuts it, and thinks he is seen no more. The door swings softly ajar meanwhile, and a pupil of his in the Bible class, who adores him as one without gloss or guile, sees her idol stand with a satisfied smile, and reenact at the vestry glass each pulpit gesture in deaf dumb show that had moved the congregation so.
Hardy's first wife, Emma, died in 1912. They had in many ways a difficult marriage, but in the months following her death, and indeed for the rest of his life, Even after his second marriage, Hardy was invaded by feelings of remorse, by memories of earlier and happier days. In 1912 and 1913, he wrote a group of some 20 poems which again and again go back and poignantly relive those memories. Among them, At Castle Botterill.
As I drive to the junction of lane and highway, and the drizzle bedrenches the wagonette, I look behind at the fading byway and see on its slope, now glistening wet, distinctly yet, myself and a girlish form benighted in dry March weather. We climbed the road beside a chaise. We had just alighted to ease the sturdy pony's load when he sighed and slowed. What we did as we climbed, and what we talked of, matters not much, nor to what it led. Something that life will not be balked of without rude reason till hope is dead and feeling fled. It filled but a minute, but was there ever a time of such quality, since or before, in that hill story? To one mind, never, though it has been climbed foot swift, foot sore by thousands more. Primeval rocks form the road's steep border, and much of they face there, first and last of the transitory in earth's long order. But what they record in color and cast is that we too passed. And to me, though time's unflinching rigor in mindless rote has ruled from sight the substance now, one phantom figure remains on the slope, as when that night saw us alight. I look and see it there, shrinking, shrinking. I look back at it amid the rain for the very last time, for my sand is sinking, and I shall traverse old love's domain never again.
Hardy was a romantic and a realist. In the poems, as in the novels, human beings are at the mercy of chance or circumstance or what looks like coincidence. There is the mystery of love, its exaltations and its obsessions, and there is the inexorable advance of age with its restrictions and humiliations. Hardy always seemed ready, he himself knew, to fall in love with beautiful women, but it was usually a love that toyed with his imagination rather than reality, a kind of sardonic idealism flirting with reticence. In just 12 lines, he sees his middle-aged reflection in the mirror and captures a moment of truth.
I look into my glass and view my wasting skin, and say, would God it came to pass my heart had shrunk as thin. For then I, undistressed by hearts grown cold to me, could lonely wait my endless rest with equanimity. But time, to make me grieve, part steals, lets part abide, and shakes this fragile frame at eve with throbbings of noontide.
So, 30 years later, beyond middle age and looking back with wry acceptance on all that had passed, he wrote what he called a consideration or a reflection on his 86th birthday. It was Hardy's address to the world after a lifetime in which, as the poem's title quizzically has it, he never expected much.
Well, world, you have kept faith with me, kept faith with me. Upon the whole, you have proved to be much as you said you were. Since as a child I used to lie upon the leas and watch the sky, never I own expected I that life would all be fair. 'Twas then you said, and since have said, times since have said, in that mysterious voice you shed from clouds and hills around, many have loved me desperately, many with smooth serenity, while some have shown contempt of me till they have dropped underground. I do not promise overmuch, child, overmuch, just neutral tinted haps and such. you said to minds like mine, wise warning for your credit's sake, which I for one failed not to take, and hence could stem such strain and ache as each year might assign.
An almost exact contemporary of Hardy's, but who died almost 40 years before him, almost totally unknown as a poet in his lifetime, was Gerard Manley Hopkins. Hopkins became a Roman Catholic convert while he was a young man at Oxford, and began his training as a Jesuit priest when he was 24. He wrote poetry from an early age, but when he took on the discipline and dedication of his Jesuit novitiate, he felt that he had to put away all such distractions. So for 7 years, he deliberately wrote no poetry, until a chance remark from his superior in his Jesuit college launched him into one of the finest and strangest religious poems in English, The Wreck of the Deutschland. He said in a letter, "I long had haunting my ear the echo of a new rhythm, which now I realized on paper. And having realized it once in The Wreck of the Deutschland, he found that he could use it again and use it with justification to the greater glory of God." In the year 1877, one of his two most productive years, he wrote a dozen or so poems of celebration, which are unique both in their visionary ecstasy and in the audacity of their language and rhythms. Hopkins' treatment of language was condensed, energetic, aiming for the particularity of words as his eye aimed for the particularity of things. What he called the inscape of things, those minute characteristics which make one thing different from another, as in pied beauty.
Glory be to God for dappled things, for skies of couple colour as a brinded cow, for rose moles all in stipple upon trout that swim, fresh fire-curled chestnut falls, finches' wings, landscape plotted and pieced, fold, fallow, and plough, and all trades their gear and tackle and trim. All things counter, original, spare, strange, whatever is fickle, freckled, who knows how, with swift, slow, sweet, sour, a dazzle dim, he flowers forth, whose beauty is past change. Praise him.
In that same year, 1877, Hopkins composed what at the time he called the best thing I ever wrote, a hymn of wonder and joy at the sight of a falcon in the sky, and through the falcon, a hymn of praise to God, the wind hopper.
I caught this morning morning's minion, kingdom of daylight's dauphin, dappled dawn-drawn falcon in his riding of the rolling level underneath him steady air, and striding high there, how he rung upon the rein of a wimpling wing in his ecstasy. Then off, forth on swing, as a skate's heel sweeps smooth on a bow bend, the hurl and gliding rebuffed the big wind. My heart in hiding stirred for a bird, the achieve of, the mastery of the thing. Brute beauty and valor and act, oh, air, pride, plume, here, buckle, and the fire that breaks from thee then, a billion times told lovelier, more dangerous, oh, my chevalier. No wonder of it. Sheer plod makes plough down Sicilian shine, and blue bleak embers are, my dear, fall, gall themselves, and gash gold vermilion.
But there's not only joy in Hopkins' poems, there is loss, as there was loss in The Wreck of the Deutschland. Loss at the decay of things, and loss of faith, too, in his own abilities, and even in the power of God to save him from that loss. Sometimes he directed this sense of loss and sorrow outwards, as in this gently melancholy poem, addressed, as he put it in a superscription, to a young child. A poem about the cycle of change and decay, spring and fall.
Margaret, are you grieving over Golden Grove unleaving? Leaves, like the things of man, you with your fresh thoughts care for, can you? Ah, as the heart grows older, it will come to such sights colder by and by, nor spare a sigh, though worlds of wanwood leaf meal lie. And yet you will weep, and know why. Now no matter, child, the name, sorrow's springs are the same. Nor mouth had, no nor mind expressed, what heart heard of, ghost guessed. It is the blight man was born for. It is Margaret you mourn for.
And there was a bleaker, more personal sense of loss in the 8 so-called terrible sonnets, which Hopkins wrote in the 1880s. In these, the spirit isn't one of celebration, as in Pied Beauty and the Windhover, but of desolation, almost of despair. In this one, I wake and feel the fell of dark. The images crowd in on one another, images of being smothered, isolated, soured, damned.
I wake and feel the fell of dark, not day. What hours, oh, what black hours we have spent this night. What sights you, heart, saw, ways you went. And more must, in yet longer light's delay. With witness I speak this. But where I say hours, I mean years, mean life. And my lament is cries countless, cries like dead letters sent to dearest him that lives, alas, away. I am gall, I am heartburn. God's most deep decree bitter would have me taste. My taste was me. Bones built in me, flesh filled, blood brimmed the curse. Self-yeast of spirit, a dull dough sours. I see the lost are like this, and their scourge to be, as I am mine, their sweating selves. But worse.
Those poems of Gerard Manley Hopkins weren't gathered together and published until almost 30 years after his death. And even then they were slow to make much impact on a literary world that wasn't ready for them. They seemed too strange. But the poems of A.E. Housman had an immediate appeal, in spite of the fact that Housman was almost as reticent and withdrawn as Hopkins. Housman's book, A Shropshire Lad, was published in 1896, and the Boer War, which came soon after, helped to make popular Housman's mixture of patriotic pride, stoical gloom, pessimism, and nostalgia. On the face of it, his poems are very simple and very repetitive. They repeat again and again that love is fleeting, lovers fickle, youth decays into age, and that death is final. What makes them marvelous and memorable isn't any great profundity or originality of thought, but their seductive and instantly recognizable music in which economy is mated with resonance. Here are 2 poems from the only other book apart from A Shropshire Lad which Housman published in his lifetime. He called the book, with a sense of finality, Last Poems. Both of them celebrate time passing. In both, despair is made beautiful.
Tell me not here, it needs not saying, what tune the enchantress plays in aftermaths of soft September or under blanching Mays. For she and I were long acquainted, and I knew all her ways. On russet floors, by waters idle, the pine lets fall its cone. The cuckoo shouts all day at nothing, in leafy dells alone. And traveller's joy beguiles in autumn hearts that have lost their own. On acres of the seeded grasses, the changing burnish heaves, or marshaled under moons of harvest, stand still at night the sheaves, or beaches strip in storms for winter, and stain the wind with leaves. Possess, as I possessed, a season, the countries I resign, where over Elmy plains the highway would mount the hills and shine, and full of shade the pillared forest would murmur and be mine. For nature, heartless, witless nature, will neither care nor know what stranger's feet may find the meadow and trespass there and go, nor ask amid the dews of morning if they are mine or no. In valleys green and still, where lovers wander maying, they hear from over hill a music playing. Behind the drum and fife, past hawthorn wood and hollow, through earth and out of life, the soldiers follow. The soldier's is the trade, in any wind or weather. He steals the heart of maid and man together. The lover and his lass, beneath the hawthorn lying, have heard the soldiers pass, and both are sighing. And down the distance they, with dying note and swelling, walk the resounding way to the still dwelling.
Someone who knew the soldier's trade rather more closely than Houseman did was Rudyard Kipling. Not that Kipling was a soldier, but he was brought up in India and worked there as a journalist, and he knew very well the life of the British Army in India, as well as the civil servants who ruled the country and the businessmen and landowners who exploited it. Kipling, from the beginning, as a very young man, made India, or Anglo-India, his special province. It's not too much to say that from an imaginative point of view, he created it for the world. In 1886, in Lahore, at the age of 21, Kipling published his book, Departmental Ditties. It contains this laconic, dry, sinister poem in which the Old Testament story of King David's treatment of Uriah the Hittite is put in an entirely Anglo-Indian context, the story of Uriah. Jack Barrett went to Quetta because they told him to. He left his wife at Simla on 3/4 his monthly screw. Jack Barrett died at Quetta ere the next month's pay he drew. Jack Barrett went to Quetta. He didn't understand the reason of his transfer from the pleasant mountain land. The season was September, and it killed him out of hand. Jack Barrett went to Quetta and there gave up the ghost, attempting 2 men's duty in that very healthy post. And Mrs. Barrett mourned for him 5 lively months at most. Jack Barrett's bones at Quetta enjoy profound repose, but I shouldn't be astonished if now his spirit knows the reason of his transfer from the Himalayan snows. And when the last great bugle call adown the Hernite throbs, when the last grim joke is entered in the big black book of jobs, and Quetta graveyards give again their victims to the air, I shouldn't like to be the man who sent Jack Barrett there.